Welcome back to The Life She Built. Last episode, we talked about what does her business, her life, her design really mean, and how do all of those parts play together. Today, I thought that I would tell you a little bit about me. And it's not because my story is particularly special or because I have this all figured out, but it's because I think understanding where I've come from helps to explain why I care so much about these conversations that we are going to have throughout these podcast episodes. A quick disclaimer that this is not going to be a highlight reel, and it's absolutely not going to be a look how successful I am episode. In fact, for myself, some parts of my journey are still very messy. And some weeks I have it really figured out, and other weeks it feels like I'm just starting. And I'm not sharing my story because I've arrived. What does that even mean, I've arrived? But I'm sharing it because, like you, I'm still building. And I'm still in the process of unraveling and building and really continuously redefining what success means for me based on the season that I am currently in. So let's get into it. I think before I can talk to you about my business and my motherhood, I think it's important that you have this part of my story because it really wrote on the wall of who I am. So I was born in Bosnia, and I was born in Bosnia when it was still ex Yugoslavia. For those people that don't know, there was a big civil war that happened. And at the time, I was 4 years old when the civil war started. Now, we ended up getting quite lucky in that we had some family in Germany and we were able to flee the civil war before I got to witness any of the tragedies that happened there. But just because I didn't witness the horrific events that happened there doesn't mean that it did not shape me. So we moved to Germany, and when I say we, it was myself, my mom, and my dad at the time. I did not have any siblings yet. And we moved to Germany, and I will tell you the full story of the move and what it felt like to be an immigrant in a future episode. But what you need to know is that at a very young age, I had to learn resilience. Now, when I was younger, I did not realize how much my life story actually shaped me because we moved from Bosnia to Germany when I was 4 years old, and then from Germany to Canada when I was 11 years old. So by the time that I was 11, I had already experienced massive transitions that most people will never know. So, like I said, I never realized how much that shaped me. But what it taught me was resilience. What it taught me was work ethic. What it taught me was that you can start over and make it. Now, unfortunately, what it also taught me is that being different or being outside of a bubble of where you're living also comes with this incredible unspoken and sometimes spoken pressure to earn your worth. And I watched my parents do that. And it really affected me. And once again, I didn't realize that until I was significantly older. So, what ended up happening is that when we moved, and both times, but in particular, I remember it when I moved to Canada, I ended up learning English incredibly quickly. And I was a straight A student, honor roll student very quickly within the first year of moving here. I'd fully learned English and I was doing incredibly well. And I remember getting an essay award because I wrote the best essay in my grade. I was always on the honor roll, and I remember earning this terrific kid award. But now looking back at it, I think that's really where kind of a switch flipped for me. And I went, wow, I'm not even trying, and look what I'm achieving. And I'm getting all of this praise for my achievements. Because at the time, I didn't get praise for who I was. I didn't get praise for my culture. I didn't get praise for my humor. I didn't get praise for my heart. Like, I got praise because I was achieving and doing so well at these things without even trying. So then for me, that really became this addiction I didn't know I had. It was to perform and to do well and to be productive. Now, when you're an immigrant, especially an only child, the eldest daughter of an immigrant family, that already comes with such pressure. And I want to be very, very clear here. I am not blaming my parents for this, but it is a natural thing that happens to us children who are in that situation where you become the translator, you become the person that absorbs all of that. It just happens. Your parents cannot shield you from that. My parents would have shielded me from it. The way that I was raised is, I know my parents would have shielded me from it if they would have known at the time what was happening, but they didn't. So you already have this pressure to be a little adult, in addition to now being naturally good at something, which for me was school and just achieving. And then this, like, something clicked in me, and I just continued to try, because I thought, if I'm not trying, what's going to happen if I try? So we moved here at the beginning of grade 5. By grade 6, I was on the honor roll. I was getting, like I said, these awards and these achievements, and they were putting me in front of the class to say how fantastic I was doing, etc. And that was great. Then in grade 7 was the next thing that I remember. Again, I was an honor roll student, and in every core subject, my natural grade was 98%. For some reason, all of it was 98. Math, science, English, social, etc. And I remember being so bothered by this. I remember being so bothered that I didn't get 100%. Now, looking back at this, if my kids came to me with those grades, it would be a high five, you carry on. Your worth is not determined by that. But what I did is I went to my teacher and I said, I want 100% in everything. What can I do to get 100%? So she gave me special projects so that I could get 100% as my final grade that year in all of those subjects. And I worked and I worked and I got it done, and she gave me the extra 2%, and yay, we celebrated. So during this, I played sports. I was in competitive karate. I was on school sports, and I was good at sports, but like, sports were not like school for me. I was very much middle of the grade type of person. There was a couple of things I was very good at in karate, but again, I was not like the athlete. That's not what I was known for. But I played sports, I danced, I was always very, very busy. I always had a million things on the go. I was a straight A student, and I also worked. I got my first job when I was 11. Again, not because I needed to work, it's not because, but I wanted to. I had this drive. And I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning on my bike and with my friend, and we were delivering flyers every morning, and I hated it. So it didn't last long, but we did it. And I babysat religiously. I was always babysitting. And then as soon as I could get my first job at 14 years old, I went and I worked at this place called Ton of Fun, which was one of those like kids play spaces, that now as parents, we roll our eyes when we have to go there. But that was my first job, and I loved it. I was a party expert, and I loved doing the birthday parties and everything. But so when I think about a 14-year-old having all of those things going on, and then I'm also saying now 98% is not good enough. I need to have 100%. And there was always this achievement underneath me. I always just wanted to get that done. Fast forward to high school, and I started wanting to go out more. I started dating, but I'm still working. I'm still achieving. I'm still doing great. I'm going from, the math 30s to now, you qualified to do calculus in grade 12, and we're doing it. And my grades never like dropped significantly, but I wasn't in the 90% anymore. I was in the 80s, and I would get the odd high 70. And like, that affected me. Like, I would stay up all night and think about it, and why is this not happening? And to be honest, it's because I wasn't studying nearly as much. I was so busy. Remember, I was working, like I had 2 jobs in high school, and I was going out, and I had a boyfriend. I wanted to hang out with my friends and all of these things. But rather than looking at my life and going, you have a very full life, I was so hard on myself, because this one part of my life that I was always so good at, this one part of my life that always felt like I had so much control over, suddenly I felt like I had given up on it. And again, we got through that. I got early acceptance into university. I only applied to one school. I only applied to the U of A, which is where I ended up going, which is why I live where I live now. I ended up staying in Edmonton because I met my husband in university. So all things were meant to be. But looking back at that, I was like, I put all my eggs in one basket. I was like, I'm going to get in, obviously. And I got in. And I don't mean for that to sound any sort of way, but that was just my mindset at the time. Failure was not even on my radar. It wasn't even an option. Like, I don't need a backup plan. This is my plan, and therefore I'm going to do it. And I got early acceptance to university, get to university, and I continue the pattern. Only this time I pressured myself even more. So I'm like, okay, I need to have straight A's. I need to have a 4.0 GPA. I need to work. I was volunteering at the food bank 10 hours a week at the time. I was working, I was bartending, I was serving, like, again, and I wanted to go out, I was dating. It was just so many things constantly happening. And I was doing quite well at all of them. My relationships, as they do at that age, they ebbed and flowed. But for the most part, I had a very robust life. But I put such pressure on myself to do well in all of those things. And I was doing great. But once again, I remember there was a finance exam, and it was a notoriously difficult exam. And somewhere along the line of everything that I had going on in my life, I missed the part that says that you can bring in a cheat sheet, because there was so many formulas and it was very challenging. And I didn't bring in the cheat sheet, and I did not do well on the exam. For most people, there is not really a way to do well on this exam without this cheat sheet. Like, there was dozens and dozens of formulas, and I didn't do well. And I remember getting that exam grade and going home and crying and crying and crying. I emailed the prof asking if I can redo it, like, rather than just going, just learn from this. Like, it upset me, and I felt so small because I didn't do well at something. But again, these are just little moments now looking back at this. I'm reliving these core memories of what I think shaped me. And there were signs that I had a certain pattern within which I was operating as a human being. And those patterns would eventually need to be shaken up, because there's only so much that you can do. So university happens, I graduate, I get a job, whatever, we're living the corporate life. Everything's going great. But of course, that's not good enough for me. Why would it be good enough for me to have a boyfriend, have a condo that we're living in, and have a full-time job and be taking care of myself? I was exercising regularly, et cetera, et cetera. So then I go and I decide that I needed to get certified to teach fitness classes, which is great. I think a side hustle is amazing, and it brought me a lot of joy. The problem is that not only was I working full-time, but I was not teaching one, not two, not three, 7 fitness classes a week. So as soon as I would get off work, I would rush there for an evening, and then the weekends. Again, it all sounds great in theory, but it was a lot. And in addition to that, for the first little bit of this, I was also still bartending. So I had a full-time job, I was bartending, I was teaching fitness classes. So it was just nonstop something. It was just, again, just constant overachievement, overachievement, overachievement. And I would get these people saying to me, like, you're incredible. How can you do all this? Yada, yada, yada. Once again, like, at the time, I didn't realize that that was actually just like fueling this monster. My house was always clean. I was always put together. Like, again, it sounds like I'm saying, like, I was amazing, but there was just this constant pressure for all of this to just be happening. And the pressure was I was doing it to myself. So that's just a little bit of the story. But I think it's really important when you're thinking back at this, that you think back at your own life, because there will be signs. There will be these little pebbles of proof how you ended up where you are now. So then I get married, and we immediately started trying to have a child. 10 months into our marriage, I find out I'm pregnant. And one thing I missed is 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant, I launched Sandra Bettina Weddings and Events. And June 17th, 2015. And then July 8th exactly, I find out that I'm pregnant with my first child. So what ended up happening there is that I was starting this business at the same time that I was growing a baby. And I go on maternity leave from, at the time, my corporate job. And instead of allowing myself a maternity leave, I grew the business on maternity leave. Now, that sounds like it should be a good thing. And now it is, sure. But at the time, if I could go back and say something to the younger version of myself, I would say, stop. Your only job right now is to heal your body and raise this baby. But I was go, 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 go. And all of the difficulty that comes with postpartum. And I also don't have my mom in the same city as myself. My mom is 6 hours away. And my support system here was like, it was virtually non-existent. So I have this baby that I'm trying to grow and a first-time mother. My body's different, my hormones are all changed, and I'm hustling to grow this business. And I never went back to my corporate job after that. I just kept going. But what I thought I could do, I thought that I could do it all at the same time. I was like, my baby probably doesn't need to go to daycare and I can probably do this, but it didn't work. The start of my motherhood is when all of that programming existing in my head from years before really came to a halt. And that is when all of these things, all of these coping mechanisms and this perfection and this overachieving and productivity, when it started to fall apart. However, it took me years into motherhood and business to realize what was happening. It wasn't like motherhood came and I had this business and I was like, oh, okay, this isn't working. Let me change it. That was not it at all. It took years because what I tried to do is I tried to do it all, and I tried to do it all at the same intensity and perfection that I did when I was younger and before I had this child. And before you know it, I had a second kid. And I said to myself, I'm going to learn. This time I'm not going to take as many weddings. I'm not going to hustle as much. My older daughter's going to go to daycare, et cetera, et cetera. And I go into labor at 38 weeks. I started having contractions the night of a wedding. So I worked a wedding at 38 weeks. Like when you're 38 weeks pregnant and you're at a wedding that's 45 minutes out of town, first of all, what a decision to make. You're on your feet for 12 hours, you're hustling, you're running back and forth. And I started having contractions at dinner. She was born the next day. And I had another wedding after that. So at the time, I had a couple girls that worked for me. They were awesome. They got it all handled. I took my 3-day-old baby and I strapped her to my chest. And I went to that wedding to check to make sure everything was set up properly. And that's not something to be proud of. Because the signal that I was sending myself is that my health mattered less than someone's wedding day. And I also want to be very, very clear here. I love being a wedding planner. And if you've ever been my client, I hope you know and you felt how much I care about your wedding day. So what I'm not saying is that day wasn't important. What I'm saying is that the signal I sent to myself is that your healing does not matter. Even though I had done everything in my power to prep my team to go and execute the wedding, and they did. I didn't just leave the client high and dry. I was in the hospital still texting to make sure that everything was set up. But that right there was not something to be proud of. And so my pattern continued. Even though I said to myself, this time you will heal, this time you will not push yourself to the limit. I was in such denial that I needed healing and that I wasn't this robot. So the cycle continued. I have this baby, I have this toddler, I have this business. Again, I am way over functioning. My only job at the time should have been taking care of my body and taking care of my baby, just like the first time I went on maternity leave. But it wasn't. I pushed myself. And then COVID happened. And again, push myself. As a wedding planner, we were rescheduling weddings nonstop, and I was working for free, basically. None of us had proper clauses in our contracts. And again, I do actually care about my clients, and I want to make sure they were okay. So once again, over-functioning, under-resting. And again, motherhood was this, I don't even know what to call it. It was this overarching umbrella that felt like it's motherhood that's making this difficult for me. What was difficult was the programming that I had put myself into, and I wasn't allowing myself to determine what my version of success at that time was. And it should have been motherhood and healing. But I didn't know what my version was at the time. I didn't know myself. I thought I could continue on with everything I had been doing my whole life, proving myself to be worthy, and just add motherhood, which is a drastic life change. And it was so hard. And then I'm also thinking, okay, I'm no longer working. This is how messed up this is. I'm growing a business. I am working. But because I wasn't working corporate, because my paychecks no longer matched what they did when I worked in HR and oil and gas, I'm also now thinking I need to be the perfect homemaker. My kids have to only have the best. My house has to be clean. We have to have a fresh meal for every single meal on the table. Everything has to be organic. And my body was no longer my body. My whole life, I was very petite and very fit. And after kids, I was 60 pounds heavier than I ever was before. And I couldn't get it down. And I felt so awful about myself because of that. Keep in mind, I am building a business, raising a baby, have a toddler, no support system locally. By this time, we did have, a daycare, which was very helpful, but it was still, I was driving them, I was picking them up, running home to make dinner. It was non-stop. And I did not have the ability to recognize what was happening. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. sometimes, nursing, and then going on my laptop to work. Even saying that out loud now, I'm just like, why would you ever do that to yourself? Why would you ever do that to yourself? So then the kids are a little bit older. And by a little bit older, I mean they are both in daycare. And that started helping. So now I am functioning well in business. I'm working. I pick them up after daycare, and we have a routine. And I love this routine. It worked really, really well for us. But I was still maintaining that push of productivity and perfection on myself. It's just now I had more structured days, if you will. So then what do? I'm going to start another business because I have all this free time, right? So then I started a boutique, and it was a product-based business. And fun fact, the space I'm currently sitting in was actually the boutique. And I've kept it since. I love this space, but now it is my studio. It's an office. It's a photography studio, small events, etc. But I started a boutique. So we have this boutique, and if you've ever done retail, you know that requires a whole other level of capacity, and it's a very different beast than a service-based businesses, both equally as difficult but different challenges. So now I have the wedding planning business, which was incredibly busy and thriving. I have this boutique that comes with so many additional challenges and financial pressures and staffing and marketing nonstop, etc. And then, of course, I still have my babies, and I have my house, and I have my husband. And again, I keep pushing, and I keep pushing. Now, for me, it was around this time that I started to call it fall apart. So at this point, my kids were about 5 and 3, and I started noticing massive changes in myself. And there was changes in myself before that, of course, but this is when I started being like, uh-oh, you cannot schedule your way out of this. You cannot journal your way out of this. You cannot push your way out of this. You cannot continuously work until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, wake up in the morning with your kids, make them breakfast, and do it all again. And wondering why you don't feel good. My mental health was shot. My patience level was non-existent. I felt like I couldn't put a sentence together. Anybody asked me a question, I felt like I was going to fall apart. Something as simple as my husband asking me, where is the lid to this Tupperware container, would make me fall apart. I simply could not handle one more thing on my brain. And that is when this podcast started to be born, before it was ever live. But that's when I realized something has to change, and I have the power to do it. And after that, there was so many more pockets of challenges and growth. And I can tell you about all of them, but I'm not sure that would be super helpful. I've already told you a whole story, but I think that story before the unraveling, so to speak, is what's important, because I think that you more than likely have something similar that you can pinpoint in your life. It's not going to be the same as my story, but if you go back into your life, I would be hard pressed to believe that you can't think of pieces in your life that have done this for you, that have gotten you to a place where you're recognizing that something needs to change. So for me, it was around 2022, 2023 that things really started to change, where I started recognizing things are not working. And I didn't figure it out right away. It took coaching, it took counseling, it took journaling, it took business mistakes that I made. And again, we'll talk about that in future episodes, but there was things that I tried that I thought would help alleviate some of the stress, and they actually added way more to it. It's not a linear process when you try to get yourself out of a life like what I had built. I had built myself a jail in the name of success. I had built myself a jail in the name of being worthy. I had built myself a jail in the name of, will other people say this about me? And I didn't even realize how addicted I was to achievement. I didn't even realize how addicted I was to that feedback of, you're doing amazing, you're amazing, look at all these things you're building. So on the outside, it looked like it was incredible. But on the inside, I was not doing well. I lost myself in all of the hustle and bustle of building, 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 achieving, achieving, achieving. And I had no idea what was actually important to me. I didn't know. And it wasn't until I slowed down and allowed myself months and months of space where I really realized what's important to me and what my success is. So that's what leads us to today. I'll tell you what my version of success is and how happy I am to be here. And again, there are moments and there are weeks when it's still not super smooth, but I always know what to go back to. And that should be the lesson here. Know what matters so that you know what you're going back to. So my version of success now is that I do still have a business. I have a thriving business on my terms. My version of success is that I get to do weddings that fill my soul. They are very design heavy. They have certain guest experiences, and they are at a certain level that I enjoy working in. I only take now 3 weddings in a 12-month time frame. So if I have a wedding in January, March, and July, I'm not taking another wedding until that January wedding falls off. So for me, I cannot do more than 3 weddings in a 12-month time frame. And it took a long time to realize what I could actually execute without guest experience and my client experience really suffering. Because for a while there, I thought that I was going to lose my reputation as getting it done because I was just so tapped for capacity. For me, success means listening to my heart and pursuing things like this because they bring me joy. For me, success is stopping work at 3 p.m. most days and picking up my kids or being there for them with a snack or with a show or with a Starbucks run because that's what we want to do. For me, success is not missing more than 1, maximum 2 evenings per week for client meetings. And I will say most times it's 0. But during, there are certain times as a wedding planner where we are busier, and I said I will never miss more than 2 days. I want to be at that dinner table with my kids. For me, success is not missing games, not missing practices that matter. When my kids think back, I want them to remember, yeah, mom took us. Mom was there. I saw her face cheering me on. If you miss the odd one, that's okay. That's life. But if I'm missing most of them in order to pursue what? That's not success to me. To me, success is being able to move my body most days in the morning before I open my computer. To me, success is being able to have 1 too many extra dirty gin martinis on the dance floor with my girlfriends. To me, success is having a husband that I look at and go, we're a team and not we're barely surviving together. At one point, our marriage suffered. We weren't doing well because everything else was chaos. I want to look at my husband in any room and think you are my person and feel that with my soul, and vice versa, because we have done what we need to do to take care of our marriage to feel that. To me, success is being able to go on vacation with my family and be mostly clocked out, not be on my laptop the whole time, but just in a different place. To me, success is being able to laugh with my kids and be silly and feel that and not see them as a nuisance because they need something from me because I'm so busy. To me, success is dressing how I want and feeling good in my body. It's not being perfect, but that matters and that requires time and it requires intentionality. And to me, success is honoring who I am through my extended family and through my culture. It's being able to know that one day when the time comes and my parents need me to be there, I'm going to be able to drop everything to be there in their old age. So that's what success is to me. And it's different for everybody. But did you notice how I never once said to me success is having X number of dollars in the bank just because? Yes, financial stability is incredibly important. Of course, that's a value I hold, but not at the expense of everything else I just said. So that's my story. It hasn't always been pretty, and there were dark, dark, dark moments. And you'll get to know more about me. Those are the things that have affected me and shaped who I was. They have written on the slate of how I went through life. And then I got to undo it all, keep the things that I loved about who I was, because some of those things really helped me to succeed, but then leave some of the other things behind that were no longer serving me. And today I am proud to say that I don't need to constantly produce to feel worthy. I'm just worthy for who I am, because that's what I was chasing. I was chasing worthiness through overachieving. That's a pretty hard thing to realize when you realize that I never loved myself enough. And the only way I thought people could possibly think anything good of me is with what I put out there. I would love to know what your story is and if you see yourself in anything that I talked about. Because in the end, all we have is ourselves. The only person that you're going to live with for the rest of your life is yourself. One day our kids grow up and they go on, and hopefully they're doing well and they're healthy and they have their own family. And we have to be in our own bodies. So take care of that person. Make sure that you know what matters to that person and design your life in a way that does that, and design your business in a way that can support that life for you. So thank you for joining me for this one. I know this was a more personal episode, and we're going to keep the personal going with a little bit of maybe inspiration next week as to how I structure my weeks, because I'm always very, very curious how other people structure their weeks and what their schedules look like. Thank you for being here with me. Until next time.